Good morning. My name is Carrie and I'm the eldest daughter of Raleigh and Arlene's eldest daughter, Kay. I've spent the last few days reflecting on the times that I spent with my grandfather, and I haven't cried one time. He brought so much joy into my life, and every time I think about the times that we had together, it either brings a smile to my face or makes me laugh. He was brutally honest, stubborn as a mule, and set in his ways, but he was funny, supportive, and generous like nobody else. He is the greatest man I ever had the opportunity to get to know. Roland Scheidecker was born May 6, 1935, to Carl and Elvilda Scheidecker in Wheeler, Wisconsin. He had a sister named Aline and brothers Richard and Robert. After graduating from Colfax High School, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy, where he served for 4 years as a boiler technician aboard the USS Boxer and USS Midway. He didn't talk about his time in service much, but he did tell us that he used to pay $5 per paycheck to the guy in admin to keep his leave maxed out. After being discharged from the Navy, he went to the Twin Cities. In 1958, he and some friends had gone to a dance at the Pines in Bloomer, Wisconsin, where he met his future wife, Arlene. Between January 1960 and November 1961, they had 3 daughters, Kay, Kim, and Linda. In the early 80s, they moved to Elk Mound, Wisconsin, where they still live today. In that home, they welcomed 8 grandchildren and 12 great-grandchildren. I was one of the lucky ones that got to call him Grandpa. He adored babies. He would hold the little kids in his lap for as long as they would let him. As they got older, he would teach them how to go fishing, how to play cards, or just watch them play. He also liked giving them special treats. We always enjoyed his popcorn butter, a pound of butter over a couple kernels of popcorn, and his Schwann's ice cream after dinner every night. I have a very special memory from when I was about 5 years old that I want to share with you today. My extended family had spent the weekend at my grandparents' house, and it was Easter Sunday. Along with our baskets, the Easter Bunny had brought each of us kids a kite. So after we found our baskets and the eggs and had our breakfast, we went outside. It was really cold out that day, and I remember being bundled up in my winter jacket. We went outside and we ran up and down the yard, and we couldn't get our kites up. One by one, each of the kids went inside. I didn't. I stayed outside because I wanted to get that kite up. So I was out there all by myself, running back and forth, and nothing ever happened. When I finally went in the house, my grandpa said, "How'd it go? Did you get it up?" I was really bummed out about the whole thing because no matter what I did, I couldn't get it up. Well, he had been watching me through the window, and he knew that I kept going at it. So the next thing that I knew, I was in the back of his pickup truck holding on to my kite string, and he was driving up and down, back and forth the front yard, getting the kite to go for me. It didn't go high. It didn't stay up long, but by golly, my kite flew that day. I remember walking back in the house with such a great sense of accomplishment because I did it. With Grandpa's help, I did it. He was rewarding me for my hard work. My cousins wanted him to bring them out in the truck, and he didn't because they didn't work as hard as I did. They had given up too easy. Even though I was one of the younger ones, I was the one that was determined to get it done. He was rewarding me for my stubbornness, my persistence, because I was just like him. I started recounting that story in one of my art classes in high school. It inspired me to do a lot of things in my life. It taught me that you never know when somebody's watching. You don't know who can see what you're doing. You don't know when the payout will come. And you don't know if doing it one more time or doing it 5 more minutes than somebody else will make all the difference in the world. In high school, my grandparents' house became my safe haven. I was welcome to come to their house anytime for any reason. Sometimes I would get in fights with my parents, and I would drive the 90 minutes to my grandparents' house. Sometimes when I got there, they were already in bed. I'd go jump in one of the beds and wake up in the morning. Some of those days I would wake up and my grandpa would be sitting up at the counter with a cup of coffee reading the newspaper. He read the newspaper every day, specifically the obituaries. I once asked him why, and he said he had to make sure his name wasn't in there. Anyways, he and I would talk about what was going on and the issues I was having, and he always gave the best advice because he could look at things without emotion and just logically and put my head back on straight before I left. My freshman year of college, I got a call from my mom saying that my grandpa had gone in for an emergency bypass surgery. It was then that I realized that he wasn't going to be here forever. I had just turned 18 that year, and it hit me pretty hard. It made me realize that I had to cherish every day that we had together because I could lose him at any time. Later in college, I moved in with my grandparents when I transferred to the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. My grandpa and I often watched the World Poker Tour, Billy the Exterminator, or our favorite, The Wheel of Fortune. Of course, each of these shows was interrupted by a Western he had seen 862 times and 3 games of some various sport. I don't know how he could keep up with all these sports, but he did. It didn't matter if it was basketball or football or baseball. He wanted to watch them all. His favorite sports teams were always the Colfax Lady Vikings and whichever team I was rooting against. We enjoyed friendly banter, political debates, playing dominoes, or going out and playing dice with coffee with his friends. After I moved out, I always loved coming back to my grandparents' house. Their first thing that my grandpa ever wanted to do was show me his garden. He had always worked so hard for so much of the year, and he was extremely proud of what he'd done. I swear he gave away 80% of everything he had gotten, whether it be to friends, neighbors, or complete strangers. Every year he would tell me, "This is the last year. It's too much work. I can't do it anymore," yada, yada, yada. Every spring, the garden would be bigger than the last year. He didn't quit until somebody else was able to take it over. I'm glad that my kids got to walk through the garden with him. My son Daniel is 7, and when I asked him what his favorite thing to do with Grandpa was, he said he liked to pick peas with me. I think Daniel relates to this so much because Daniel grew up in cities around the country, but he's never lived in the country. So the idea of walking up to a plant, eating it, and throwing away the shell just was the coolest thing ever. As my grandparents' garden grew more and more abundant, they started canning. Family favorites were pickles, sauerkraut, and peaches. Just kidding. Grandpa didn't share the peaches. They were his favorite. Whenever I would come to visit, he would tell me to take a bunch of stuff, or after I moved out of state, he would send boxes of canned goods with my parents when they were coming to visit. Well, one year, my husband and my kids and I were sitting down and eating dumplings with his sauerkraut, and I found something weird on my plate. So I called my sister and I said, "So we were just eating and I found this thing," and I held up my fork on FaceTime so she could see it. And she started screaming and laughing and talking, and I couldn't understand her. I didn't know what was going on. Well, long story short, I found out that everyone that had taken Grandpa's sauerkraut that year, he had warned them, "Just to let you know, as we were canning, I lost a Band-Aid in one of the crocks. So if you find it, you win the prize." Yes, a Band-Aid fell off of his finger into the crock. So I was thoroughly disgusted about this, and my sister thought it was hilarious that this happened to me. So I called my grandpa shortly after I hung up with my sister, and I said, "Well, Grandpa, I found it." And he immediately knew what I was talking about, and he laughed and laughed and laughed. I asked him what the prize was, and he said, "You've already got it. That Band-Aid's the prize." And I said, "No, thank you. I'll bring it to FedEx. It'll be on your doorstep tomorrow." That's a story that we still laugh about. My grandpa also liked to make wine. He didn't really drink it, but he loved to make it. He would have 5-gallon jugs lined up in his kitchen for most of the year, fermenting. He shared it with anyone that stopped by, or if we were going somewhere, he would bring it, or with Rhonda. He shared a lot with Rhonda. He did have a sweet tooth, though. He loved fruit, berries, baked goods. When I was at his house this summer, I was down in his basement, and I heard someone coming down the stairs. I thought it was odd because he was the only one home and he never comes downstairs. It had gotten hard for him to walk at this point, so he was very slow, but he did hobble down. I said, "Grandpa, what are you doing?" And he said, "Grandma's got some fudge in the freezer. Gotta get it before she gets home." So I went in the laundry room with him and we dug through the freezers until we found the container of fudge. The cover of the container was stuck on or something. I couldn't get it open. I said, "Grandpa, I don't think we can get this open." He said, "Oh, we'll get it open." So we worked at it and we did eventually get it off. So then my grandpa goes and he takes 2 huge handfuls, literally as much as he can carry in his 2 hands. And then he says to me, "Only take a little bit, otherwise Grandma will know someone is sneaking and she'll blame it on me. Oh, and make sure you put it back where you found it." He turned around and went right back up the stairs where it came from. I couldn't help but laugh and laugh and laugh, thinking about 35-year-old me and 83-year-old him, just up to some crazy antics like we're 12 years old. The 4 weeks I spent with him this summer were amazing. I got to have that last walk with him through the garden. My kids got to have that last ice cream night with him. I couldn't ask for anything more. I'm so grateful for the time we had together. He knew his time was coming. He hated winter, and he always said that he'd be pissed if he died in the spring because that meant he had to survive through another winter for nothing. We had a Christmas in July celebration at their house, and he specifically told me, "I don't want you coming back for my funeral. We've got the whole family here, and this is all I need. This is how I want to be remembered." So I gave in, and I gave him that last wish. I didn't come to Wisconsin from his funeral. I'm sending him love from Virginia. I don't feel any sadness for him. He lived a full life, and he was ready to go. The way I look at it, we got a bonus 18 years with him because we could have lost him back in 2000. And I'm so glad that I got the wake-up call and I took the time to enjoy him while we had him. I am, however, sad for my children and generations to come. My kids' memories will fade over time, and by the time they're adults, they probably won't remember much of him. And for the future generations that will never know him, he was an amazing man. He was stubborn, but he was supportive. He didn't buy much, but he gave so much away. He wasn't affectionate, but he loved with all of his heart.